Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Page Turners Plus. As promised from the last time you saw us, today we'll be reflecting on Barbara Jenkins' The Rightest Place. To tell you a bit more about this novel and the author, we have Paula.
Thank you, Roll J. Barbara Jenkins is a Trinidadian writer. The Rightest Place is her first novel. This is a story about Belmont village in Trinidad and a ruthless white woman who was neither born nor raised in the Twin Island Republic. A novel with a white protagonist is a hard sell to an English speaking Caribbean readership. The oldest of our nations are only two generations removed from a literary tradition which, as Olive Senior lamented, told us nothing about ourselves. There was nothing about us at all. How those pale northern eyes and aristocratic whispers once erased us. How our loudness, our laughter debased us. So I worried about self inflicted erasure. I raised an eyebrow at the dreadlock wearing, dashiki sporting protagonist Indira Gabriel, who had followed her Rastafarian husband to Trinidad. But before I could channel Kendrick Lamar to chant They Not Like Us, I got to know her. An Indian born woman raised by Indian adoptive parents who, in all probability, were Dalit. This woman had been through some things. And in this story of community and chosen family, for her own survival, Indira Gabriel will embrace the loudness, the laughter that, far from debasing us, are the forces that sustain us.
Wow, thank you, Paula. And I think we could pick up right where you left off. How do you feel about the fact that the protagonist is a white woman who isn't Trinidadian born or raised? I mean, for me, I didn't really see any issues until maybe towards the end of the novel, and the issues weren't based on the fact that a white woman was included as the protagonist. They were more the issues I had were more to do with her own treatment of her whiteness within the society, if I could put it that way. But in terms of Barbara Jenkins using a white protagonist in this story, I think she landed several blows. She gave the readers what I assume she wanted the readers to get from this particular novel, and so I think maybe it could have been achieved with another protagonist, but I think the use of a white protagonist in this story landed all the blows for me and demonstrated exactly what I think Barbara Jenkins was trying to demonstrate. Tony, I see you agreeing.
Well, Roger, I'm thinking about this from many sides. It's a community setting that I am not unfamiliar with, right? I will tell you that in the Grenadines here in St. Vincent, something like that would not be uncommon, Paula, for a person from another, um, well, I don't want to say alien country, but outside of the region, white, but come to this part of the world, settles, and tries to blend in as a person born here, culturally adopt and almost lead certain cultural themes within our living. It's a leadership role that they take up that always be have me bemused, right? Um, and I see that. I thought the author was making using the protagonist quite effectively, quite skillfully to bring out um, the interplays in that community, right? I thought that was very skillfully done. And I don't think it would have worked with another one of us. Okay, I don't think the same thing would have come across. I had no issues with it, Paula, or Francine, Roger. I had no issues with it. Felt a little uncomfortable at times with, and that's just because of the demons in my history, right? Felt a little uncomfortable at the times that this person seems to be everything is galvanizing around her, and the fact that she's white just made me sort of felt a little repulsive. Okay, but that's my problem. That's not hers. That's not Indira's issue, right? That's an issue that I have to deal with. So I had no problem with it.
In fact, it took me a little while to realize that this was a white protagonist, even though it's literally one of the first things she said about herself. But because I was thinking, well, her name is Indira and she comes from India, so maybe when she just means like she's really light skinned. So, but eventually I realized that she was white. But I agree with what you've all said, that I think the author really used her skillfully as kind of like the hub. And I feel like in terms of what you said, Tony, about, someone like that, taking leadership, I feel like it was kind of thrust upon her when she had no choice but like step up and do things, because up until the moment she realized that, wait, this, solo isn't coming back. I get the impression she wasn't that involved in running things. She wasn't that involved in running the bar. It's only when she realized that, well, now I need to fend for myself, that she stepped up and did that. And I feel like using her, it was a really good way to juxtapose all the other characters. And I never got the impression that I never got the impression she was like using her whiteness. I think she was more using her personality and her temperament and her experience to do all the things that she was doing. That's more what came across to me.
And another thing too is that Indira is very aware of the fact that there is power in her whiteness. She is not. She doesn't. She's not in denial about that. There was a kind of funny scene where she's kind of talking herself into getting into character to go get the loan, and she says, one of her assets is the fact that she's white, and she says, she struggled with it, but she says it's just a fact. And she also reflected on the fact that she didn't have the burden of being local white with the history of local whites. She mentions her friend Suzanne, who she says behaves as though she's a victim. And she said something to the effect that she doesn't have the burden of having to misremember history. So Barbara Jenkins she was able to use this character to make a lot of comments about race relations in Trinidad, and this phenomenon of white Caribbean people, because it's not just Trinidad, behaving as though they are victims when in fact they are tremendously, tremendously privileged.
Yeah. There was some questioning of her being by the other characters in the book about, when they were just kind of wondering, where did Solo meet her in the first place? What was she? Probably some, nightclub performer, stripper. Well, I mean, I'm just throwing in those things, but alluding to those sorts of things, that she was a nobody really, could have been. But here she is now trying to sort of lead things, tell us what we must do. Yeah, this is the initial stages. Everybody's trying to buy in to her vision of the rightest place, what it could be, right? And there was so, and I think that was well done too. That the fact that the other characters who she eventually led, I would say, were questioning her authenticity. Like, hello, because you think you're white. I mean, they didn't say it, but I think that was implied, right? So I saw the attempt at some balance, if you want to call it that.
And then one of the things that we can't escape would be things that we could consider taboo throughout the novel. So, did this novel confront any of your personal taboos? I don't know who wants to start there.
That was a strong word. Um, a very strong word. I don't know what what direction you want to take on this. Sexual taboos, I don't know. I mean, whoever crafted this question, you can guide me
Since
on
I
that.
crafted the question, let me answer it. Because, quite frankly, this novel, I didn't realize that I had a taboo with uh, concerning older women and younger men. I really didn't know that I had that taboo until I read this novel. And just like Indira was questioning what she was doing with this little boy, I was doing exactly the same thing. And the novel actually made me, it was good. I think it was very effective because it made me confront my own prejudices. Because, and she, I think she did that very deliberately because she also shows us the relationship between Carly and Sonity. And there was a large age gap because I think Carly was in his 50s, Sonity was in her 30s. So there's like a 20-year age gap there. And I did not find that it certainly didn't make an impression on me until I realized that the author was doing that deliberately to
Mhm.
say to your, she was asking her readers to question your prejudices,
Yep,
or I think that's what she was doing.
yep,
So
yep, yep,
it was effective.
yep. The age gap between um, Indira and why am I forgetting his name? What's his name?
Jason,
Indira
Jason.
Jason.
Jason, right? You know, that was, we knew there was a big age difference, or we assumed there was a huge. To me, it was massive, right? But it was never really spelled out. You know, you realize that. I when I got to the ending of it, I said, "But wait, what's the age gap really? What what was it? Was
You
it
had
10
to do the
years?
calculation.
Hmm,
You had to do a calculation. I think it was about 15 years.
15.
Yeah,
Hmm.
if you had to go through the novel and look at the timelines to see what it possibly was, and it was
But
about 15
but
years.
when he was introduced, the setup I think was brilliant, right? When he was introduced, where she was looking through the blinds and she caught the eyes of this boy in the way it was described, looking back up at her, right? You are thinking this is a child compared to her. So that's the setup. The setup was vivid in my mind, right? And I think, Paula, that is what really brought out your taboo. I think that's that's what gave you the jolt, right? Because I think the setup was brilliant. And
I don't think it's just a setup. I think I have a prejudice which
mm,
I need to deal with. Um,
yeah.
I don't think it's just a setup.
But do you? And I think this is a question further on. I'm not sure, right? But I want to say it here. You realize the ease at which this relationship was accepted. There was some resistance in the beginning, some talk behind, but after a while, it was normalized. It was like, okay, they all got along very happily with it. Nobody. It was not an issue for them. Issue for us as the readers, I suppose. But
It was an issue initially because
initially, yes. Mm,
yes, Cynthia was not happy. Cynthia thought there was um, the possibility of exploitation. So I wouldn't say that it wasn't an issue. What happened is what happens in real life. Even if we initially are unhappy with something that someone else is doing in our community, it's none of our business. So we have to accept that and just get on with it. And I think that is what the community did.
I also think that Barbara Jenkins really demonstrated Jason's maturity extremely well. Like his maturity and also how their relationship developed so that you can actually see that this wasn't just some, fly by night thing. Yes, he was young, but he wasn't like some stupid little boy, if you see what I mean. So I think, and yeah, Cynthia was very concerned and said she wasn't going to say anything to the grandmother, but she was going to keep an eye just to see how things were going. So I guess she was eventually satisfied.
yeah, she was. But is the important point there about Jason's maturity as he went through the novel and the responsibilities he had to start to meet up to. But the power balance in that relationship with him and Indira, it wasn't lopsided, It was at times, but I think Jason at one time had the benefit of the power balance. And that back and forth. Um, somebody asked about exploitation, and I thought maybe yes, there's a bit of that, and we'll discuss that further. But in terms of the power balance in that relationship, I didn't get the impression that Indira consistently had the upper hand because she was the older person by a decade or so in the relationship. So that again was interesting.
Yeah, and I think as Francine mentioned, Jason exhibited quite a high level of maturity because even when he was facing homelessness and joblessness, he still sort of resisted because I mean he could have easily manipulated the situation to say, well, we have this romantic thing going on. I need a job. I need a place to live. And he found different ways. He was like, I'm not just going to accept that, you know, he knew that option was available to him, but he resisted it. And I think that demonstrated quite a high level of maturity. And he recognized that he had some power to yield in that relationship as well. In terms of the community, well, with the exception of Cynthia having no objection to the relationship, I think it's sort of a symptom that's quite pervasive throughout our societies where people see these things and they know it's wrong, but they don't speak about it.
Wrong,
And Jasmine
Roger.
wasn't a
You
minor,
sure you want to
right?
use that word? Wrong.
Um, they
Sounds
know
like
it's
Roger has some prejudices too.
I do because throughout the novel, when going through the book, I have a bunch of notes, particularly in those areas, and I was just like, "What is this?" So I do have prejudices in that sense. So I'm with you on this, Paula, but I recognize that Barbara Jenkins demonstrated quite a lot just with that particular aspect of the story. So
Wait,
focusing
I
on
just wanted,
what
can I just
Francine,
jump
yes.
back in with, I would say I don't have as strong prejudices as you and Paula. However, I was kind of shocked by the way their first encounter happened. I thought that seemed highly inappropriate. That first, I was like, what are you doing? To Indira, I mean, because yeah, that I thought that was that I was worried at that point, like, where is this going? Like, is she crazy or what? But luckily,
Solo was
Barbara Jenkins.
gone.
But
Solo was flying
Francine,
high.
Francine,
Francine
did
has
you
a son,
have
eh?
that?
Let's just
No,
remind ourselves that Francine has a son, and that may be one of the
Right,
influencing
because
factors
at that
there.
time, I still wasn't sure how old he was.
Mm.
So yeah, but but even it just felt, what's the word? Non-consensual. That's the way it
Coercive.
was. Yeah, it felt, like I said, it felt that way
no,
to me.
Mm.
no. There was no suggestion of coercion.
No.
Um, no, absolutely not. Um, she made a move, and he was not objecting to the move.
Yeah, but it's
Which is
like,
how men
but
approach
Francine.
women all the time.
Yeah, but
So
I
I'm
think
not sure
True,
that you're not being sexist.
I
I
think
felt
if you
that
throw the
she
age difference
made
in
a
there,
move when he was in a vulnerable
that's the point.
position. That is what I didn't like
That's the
about it.
point.
Make
Because
your move, but
I
I
would feel
felt
the
that
same way of an older man doing that to
to a young
a younger
girl.
girl.
Yeah.
While it's consensual, you would feel that um, one's vulnerability on the one side may be taken advantage of, right? So I think that's a factor.
I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I don't
Right.
remember considering him vulnerable or noticing that he was in a vulnerable position. But I don't want to spend too much time
Yeah.
on
Mm.
this.
Okay, let's move on.
So actually, I think what we should do now is take the reading from Barbara Jenkins, and then we'll pick up this discussion when we come back. Stay
Hello,
tuned.
my name is Barbara Jenkins. I am the author of The Rightest Place. And I'm going to read for you a small segment from the section of the book where Carly is painting the wall of The Rightest Place. Cynthia starts off speaking about what's going on. 2 days pass, and I, Cynthia, watching the stream of people rushing past my front gate. I really wasn't expecting people to get such excitement from watching man paint wall. I figured I best had check it out for myself, so worked my way to the front row cell. I see Carly turn to face me, bow down like he on stage, and pull out a tin from his pocket. Carly pick out a crayon. He stretch his arm out and he study the crayon good. He bring it back to his face, he lick the tip. Quick, he run up the ladder with the crayon in his left hand. He rotating his arm with the crayon trailing along the wall. When he reached the top, he switched the crayon to the right hand and run backward down the other side of the ladder, arm rotating on crayon tip against the wall. He stepped back, and we see a long black spiraling curl up one side of the wall over the door and down the other side. Well, the people clapping and clapping. I, Cynthia, could barely restrain myself from clapping too. I not seeing any artwork to speak of, but geez and ages, the man could real do performance. Carly take a bow, then turn back to the wall. He draw plenty ovals, he draw lines, he draw dashes, he fold up the ladder, he rest it against the wall, then he go on. Next day, Indira ready upstairs. She peeping through the jalousie slats, craning her neck. Cecil arrive. He behaving like if he's the project manager. He walked towards the ladder prop up against the wall. Next to it is a large cardboard box. He look inside. He glanced round the pavement and forecourt and nod with satisfaction. The national spirit of entrepreneurship strongly in evidence. Bostic there selling beers from the cooler, Jumbo the nuts man throwing bags of salt and fresh nuts at his customers under the big red Digicel umbrella, just Sodra spooning chana, tamarind sauce, mango chutney, pepper sauce onto a bara, slapping another bara over, wrapping the doubles and passing it to Annette, sliding the package and paper napkin into a brown paper bag, taking money, giving change. Miss Mabel walking through the crowd calling, "Sweetness, come for sweetness." Tulum, popo ball, tamarind ball, sugar cake, caramel, and coconut brittle. Chairs, little tables, benches jostle for space on the forecourt, spilling onto the pavement. There is an air of festival, Indira thinks, like being at a cricket match at the Oval or an entertainment with Nicky and Errol on the Brian Lara promenade. People come up close to Carly's sketch and are deep in discussion about what he do, what they guess he going to do, what they think he should do. Then Carly appears. This time, the artist sporting a red beret and a long white outer garment over his t-shirt and khaki short pants. Boy alert the crowd. Ay, ay, ay. Carly, reach. Cecil call out, "Carly, your granny just passed here looking for she 90, like you didn't ask she if you could make her borrow." The crowd erupt in laughter. Carly throw one evil cut eye in Cecil's direction and make to turn back to go home. Bostic catch him by the arm. "Don't worry with them. They's a set of ignorant people." Admiral shout, come on, man. People waiting to watch you do your thing." Bostic stride up, shoulders wide as a fridge. "Cecil, I think you had enough beers for the evening." Cecil look at the ground, then up at Bostic, who continued, "Tell Carly, the artist smock looking nice." Cecil is somewhat chastened, but would not go so far. He meet the challenge halfway. "Man is true, you could pass for Picasso." Carly walks through the parted crowd towards his mural. Carly stand back, take a slim paintbrush from the pocket of his smock, hold it at arm's length, squint at the wall, put back the brush in his pocket, stare at the wall, click his finger and say, "Marigold." Bostic looked down into the cardboard box, lift out a can. He take it over for Carly inspection, tilting it label side up. Carly give it a glance, a little nod, and continued to stare at the wall. Bostic pries up the lid and take the open tin over to Carly. He pick up a wide brush, dip it in the marigold, and starting from the left side of the wall, he skip up the ladder, running the brush not precisely over, but more a loud echo of the charcoal spiral of the previous day. He switched the brush to the right hand and run backwards down the ladder, transmuting the black curves into gold. He dip again. This time he run up from the right side and down the left. The crowd, tiptoeing and swaying from side to side to dodge the heads of those in front, see that he replicates the first spiral, but further up the wall, both spirals intertwining above the doorway. Carly bowed to the assembly, handed the brush to Bostic, and then he gone.
Welcome back. So before we took the reading, we were spending a lot of time discussing the storytelling, Barbara Jenkins' ability to give multiple storylines within particular scenes, etc. So I want to pick up on something that caught my interest, especially with this question. The storytelling in this novel alternated between accounts of hijinks and very weighty subject matter. How did that work for you? I could say it worked perfectly for me. I think Barbara Jenkins struck a perfect balance with this. I know in our um, August novel, we had a discussion where, as Paula especially found that the writing in "Let Me Liberate You" was perfect, and after discussion, I did find it worked well. But then before that I had an issue with mixing serious matters with hijinks. But I think it's an effective device to use, especially in the Caribbean. We're people of hijinks. We're people of good storytelling, infusing humor with everything we say, even if it's a very serious matter. So I think Barbara Jenkins did a perfect job with this. I have no objections to it.
And I think Trinidadians are genuinely like that too. Trinidadians laugh at themselves. I mean, there's more than anybody else, right? They see humor in serious things, and I mean, most Caribbean people. I don't want to single out a nation that may be a little less so, but Trinidadians, I would say, are very much like that. And Barbara Jenkins being a Trinidadian herself, and the novel being based in Trinidad with Trinidadian characters, I think it worked well. I liked the humor. Um, I It brought the characters to life, to be honest with you. Um, and a note on the serious things, the social commentary, if you want. Those themes, I know you all realize by now, they run through so many of the novels that we have reflected on, and this one, The Rightest Place, no different. Um, so I thought it was a good blend.
And there were so many really scary, serious issues. I mean, there was human trafficking, um, children being sold into sex slavery. Um, that you needed a break, and I really enjoyed the scene where Carly is painting the mural. I could just see that happening. That would happen anywhere in the Caribbean. It will just turn into theater, and I really enjoyed that.
I enjoyed, yeah, the hijinks, like you've all said, and I definitely appreciated, the weightier topics. Sometimes I did feel like that the transitions were a bit uneven. I've had like a kind of an uneven feeling, but I did enjoy reading both about the hijinks, and then because I felt that the language she used when she was writing about the weightier topics was absolutely brilliant and really like captured my interest. Like she wrote all those sections absolutely beautifully. So yeah, generally speaking, I would say it worked.
The political corruption, which is what and one of the topics she dealt with on the serious side, but humorized it. Um, I think that was relatively new to the books that we've been discussing. They've been more, we've not really touched novels that gone into that um, political corruption with the councilman I'm talking about, and the checkbook that that seems to have its taxpayers' money or whatever, but it seems to be his personal affair. Um, and if you know Trinidad, you'd hear a lot of those stories, things like that. And I thought it was a good input into the novel. And another one of the serious themes, which very serious, it's not to be made light of.
And Tony, it seems almost paradoxical, but I think it was humorous because it was true. We've heard these stories. We
Mm-hmm,
we
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
we know these things
Yeah,
happen,
yeah, yeah.
and this is fiction, but I feel like Barbara Jenkins was probably alluding to something that she knows that we know. So I think that just made the story a lot better. We could relate so much to these things
Correct,
happening. It seems
correct.
humorous, it seems far fetched, but we know these things happen.
They happen.
Yeah, definitely. So another question is, who or what is more important to the story? Indira, Belmont, or Trinidad? I think Belmont. I just think Belmont. The story paints quite a vivid picture of life in Belmont, and I know Tony had some reservations about how Belmont was sanitized. So I'll let you speak about that, Tony. But I think she gave us a vivid picture of how people lived. The challenges they faced, the fact that you had situations where, not revealing too much, the poor was literally stealing from the poor.
Mhm.
These are things that people face. I had, again, no issues with that. Tony.
Yeah. Well, no, the Rightest Place seemed to have been this enclave within a rough community where everything became bohemian. It was like this art um, center. Started, as Paula said, when Carly was doing his bit, and that became very theatrical to all these would be Philistines to art. I don't want to insult them, but you know, um, art is not necessarily a priority in people who are living at the survival level, right? Not saying they're not artistic. Don't get me wrong, okay? But how much time they devote to giving it significance is another matter. Um, so I found that an interesting way of painting a community, which normally you pick up a novel, and if you read about a community with that, you may be talking about crime and more like how the one armed sister sweeps a house, that kind of thing. But in reflecting on our pre-discussion um, and looking at my initial feeling about that sanitization, I realized that because the theme was around a sort of the Rightest Place was an artistic expression place. It started with solo and its music and all that sort of thing. So I conceded, Paula, that sanitization was a strong word, but it just seemed like a shrine inside of this what is normally a community with serious social issues, right? Belmont is the gateway to places like Morvant, Laventille, and we know, I mean, in modern day and also in the time that era, that novel is pitched, we know the problems. We know that life is not so idealistic as I got to feel at times in parts of the novel, right? So I don't know if I've answered the question, Roger, but
I don't
yeah.
think it portrayed the novel portrayed Belmont as idealistic in any way. Um,
No, no, no. I
the
don't think it did. I'm just saying at times I got this feeling that within the Rightest Place, the vibe was where I guess you forgot everything else that's happening around you. You know.
But the
Well, I
Rightest
mean,
Place functions as kind of a community center in the same way that, say, a barber shop does
Mhm.
or a rum shop does. So I don't think there was anything other than there is always going to be a center, some kind of center in any community where people go to let off steam. And I think that is all the Rightest Place did.
Yeah, I agree because I mean, even in the depths of poverty and hard times, I mean, people need to have somewhere where they can just go and be themselves, slap some dominoes, throw back some drinks, crack some old time, some, make some old talk, crack some stupid jokes like they were all doing, tease one another, and forget about, how hard things can be. I feel like that's what the Rightest Place was. I didn't feel like it was idealizing anything. I think she was showing us that, no matter how hard things are, this is the human spirit, basically.
I agree. Although I think some of it is. I'm not trying to hold on or dig in, but I found some of it a bit utopic. In that things just seem to have been so. Um, Resolution of matters seem to have been so easy within that in that environment in the Rightest Place. The people who had disagreements quickly came around to resolving it, and it just seems so like
I do
Okay,
agree
that
with
I
that.
agree with it.
I do
That
agree
I
with
agree
that.
with.
I do agree with
Mhm.
that. Yeah, I also
But
agree with that.
then, and I hope the author doesn't think fashion out of place. But Barbara Jenkins is from a different generation. The Belmont that she grew up knowing might have been represented in this novel, even though she was writing in a very different time. Her vision of what Belmont is or was probably came out in this
and you're
novel, where
probably right,
Belmont was once
Roger,
a
because
peaceful place.
people were the good in people in a different generation, different eras, far more upfront. The way people lived, and that may have been the Belmont she was describing.
And on that point, I did look up Belmont because it's not a community I'm familiar with. And Belmont has a history of being the the nice neighborhood for the black middle class. That was how it started off, because the black middle class weren't allowed to live in the really upscale community, so they created their own upscale community, and that is a history of Belmont.
Yeah, and I suppose as Roger says, she's writing or she's reflecting memories before the crime, before the distrust, before because there's a lot of trust in the characters in this. I found that there was a lot of trust between um I Cynthia and Jason and
But
Indira and Bostic and.
couldn't that be because it was a very small, we're talking about a relatively small group of people who pretty much saw each other every day at the Rightest Place.
Mm,
So it didn't surprise me that there was this trust between them. They were a fairly close-knit group. She didn't introduce a lot of, I mean, a lot of, outside characters. There were a few, and then they were just really on the periphery. They came in, one thing happened, and then they left. But the core group of characters are people that saw each other pretty much every single day. So it makes sense to me that they would have that trust and that community feeling.
So I want to focus on a mainstay of this Belmont community, Cynthia. Cynthia describes herself as a Mako. Is she really?
I did not think Cynthia was a Mako. Um, my understanding of a Mako is that a Mako is a gossip who just wants to stir up trouble. Cynthia liked people's business, but she was not going around spreading stories. What I found interesting in this novel is Cynthia played the role that the tongues played in what was the novel? What was it called again? Neruda on the Park.
Neruda
Neruda
on
of
the
the Park,
Right,
and
Right.
also
So
the
right.
and also the
Cynthia,
Ghetto News
yeah,
Network in
In
What
What a
Mothers Love Don't Teach
yeah,
You.
love
but
don't
more
teach you.
so, I think on the tongues in Neruda on the Park, because she was the chorus of this novel. She was the one who would tell us, tell us the nuances, and she starts off the novel starts off with her saying, "I will let them speak for themselves." But when people are speaking about themselves, there are things they leave out. So I'll fill you in on that. and she bookends the novel. She starts it and she closes it. So I will we'll have an opportunity to ask the author, but I think that was the role she was supposed to play. She was supposed to be a chorus, but she was not a Mako. I don't know if anybody else.
No, I agree
I'm
with you. She
surprised.
wasn't a Mako.
Yeah,
She wasn't running and telling people's business. She knew everything that was going on. She was more almost like a, I don't know, like
I think
a
her job
protector.
description
Like she was like kind of overseeing everything and making sure things didn't go wrong. Like the whole thing with Jason and everything. She was like, I'm watching and not saying anything until I see something. Yeah, she would know. I wouldn't call her a Mako.
She certainly
her
did.
job title was limited by the vernacular. Because I can't think of another term to describe her. So that's why she got Mako, even though she wasn't really
Well, I
Makoing.
mean, she certainly did study other people's business. She made it a business to study other people's business. I got that. But as Paul was saying, she wasn't facetious. I didn't get the facetious side of she didn't turn her observations and what she learned into something problematic for the person, and that's how maybe we interpret a Mako to be. A Mako just doesn't see, but a Mako then goes and makes mischief, you know. And Cynthia didn't Cynthia didn't come across to me as such a person, as the mischief maker, that is.
And to speak about another character who doesn't feature much, well, his name is mentioned throughout, but Bostic. Is Bostic's commitment to Solo proportionate?
You want me to answer that as a man? No. A blood brother, eh? I mean, come on, man. We're not. I'm not gonna see my brother go down like that. Just this young boy comes and sweeps him away. I mean, yes, he has himself to blame. He's gone. He's fled the scene and all that. But it's not long after he he went away. Was it because Boston knew he wasn't coming back? I don't know if that had something to do with it. Fact that there was no imminent return, so it didn't matter. But I didn't see him being protecting that relationship in with the sort of vigor I expected, you know. Um, and that's my answer to the question. I didn't think it was proportional.
yeah. We didn't hear directly from Solo himself, but it did seem disproportionate to me. It did seem to me that Bostic was a lot more committed to Solo than Solo. I mean, Solo disappears. I mean, it's not just when he's sent away to Ireland. He was a young man at the time. He couldn't control that. His father sent him to med school. But when after he comes back and he does help Bostic get back on his feet. He is good to him. I don't doubt that he loves him. But then he disappears. He disappears to Toronto, and Bostic never hears from him. What he does is he thrusts responsibility on Bostic. Take care of Indira. Take care of the Rightest Place.
Do you think that's why
And
Bostic?
then he doesn't hear from him at all.
Do you think that's why
Um,
Bostic just sort of? Well, I wouldn't say turn a blind eye to Jason and Indira's relationship, but like I was saying, I expected him to be a little bit more resentful of it, because of what Solo meant to him. And I thought that's where the question was leading. So that's how I answered it. But yeah, I get your point in terms of Solo just sort of abandoning things and saying, Bostic, this is your trouble, you know.
So, as Paula just mentioned previously when we were talking about Cynthia, the story ends with Cynthia suggesting that it may not be a good thing for all loose ends to be tied up. Without creating spoilers, and this will be a very difficult task, which loose ends do you think she or the novel on a whole is referring to, and is she right?
One major loose end is Jason's paternity. And I think Cynthia is right. Um, there are some ants nests that you mustn't stir up. Um, And I believe that the novel is right because the novel mentions that same kind of antness twice, because the paternity of Precious is also something that her mother is not willing to to give any kind of light to. And she explains why. She says, I've left it too long. I can't go and thrust paternity on this man who doesn't know that this child exists. I can't go and thrust a father on this child who has never known that this man is her father. And when Jason's paternity is being reflected on, it's a very similar kind of narrative, and I think it's correct.
Even Jason's father, not going to reveal any names, says mother and father is egg and sperm business or something to that effect towards the end of the novel. And in a way, it seems like he's passing off responsibility, but I think when you get the grander picture, it seems like the right decision to make in those circumstances. It's not like as if he's not been a relatively good person to Jason in the circumstances again, but I think it's the right decision to take. And it's a loose end that is best left loose.
I think also, I mean, and that's an obvious loose end. I think, and I think that's the main one. I believe that she's referring to, or the author would have us think about. Um, but there were others like I don't know with Solo's eventual fate. He just sort of slipped away. Um, he started the thing, Let's don't forget it. This Rightest Place wouldn't exist without him, but he just seemingly vanishes into thin air. And to me, that's kept loose. Um, then in the relationship with Indira and Jason is another kind of Lucius end. We leave there not knowing what's happening there. Really, is this it? That's
I
it.
don't know.
They live
I
happily
feel
ever
like
after.
I feel like, and to me that wasn't a loose end. I think that was a draw your own conclusions. I think it was pretty clear what was gonna happen. I think
To
for me
you,
the
I
loose
don't
the
know. I don't know what was going to happen, Francine.
oh well, okay, well, maybe you might have to read the last few chapters again then.
Yeah. Okay.
For me the loose end that I am most interested in is what happens when Bostic takes his trip. That is what I was like,
Mm,
I would really like to know where that is going because I had some good questions about that.
mm, mm,
But actually I feel like a lot of it got wrapped up very neatly, which I'm not necessarily a big fan of things being wrapped up so neatly, but at the same time, it was nice. So
So, unfortunately, we're quickly running out of time. So, I think we'll end the program there for today. So, I want to thank our viewers for joining us for another episode of Page Turners Plus. The next time you see and hear from us, we will be interviewing Barbara Jenkins on her first novel. And I think it's her only novel as well, The Rightest Place. Thank you for joining us and see you next time.